inviting me to your call. I see that Jason and Chad have also joined from our company. Chad drives our marketing, our sales, and all things community engagement oriented. So Melanie, who I know you've met with Marianne, and some of the other folks we have report up through Chad. Jason is our COO and general counsel, and handles site acquisition, handles contracts, regulatory, anything that we need to do to get sites from an idea or a need to ready for construction. So just a little bit real quickly, I'm going to try to keep things here to about 15, 20 minutes. At the outset, our whole purpose in life as a company, our vision is to create a level playing field for rural America. So we do not service Green Bay or Appleton or Madison. The largest cities that we service are, the largest city is Monroe, Wisconsin, which is slightly under 10,000 people. We consider really lucrative communities to be communities between 1,000 and 2,500, or townships that have somewhere between 500 and 1,500. Where we have townships that have under 500 people, generally that requires some type of subsidization from someone somewhere. Now, what we've learned in the last couple of years is just because we're focused on rural markets doesn't mean that there isn't also needs in Stevens Point or Wisconsin Rapids or other small to mid-sized communities that are maybe more urban than we normally go to. So, but we really want to stay focused on rural portions of the state and of the upper Midwest. We currently operate about 287 sites, mostly in the state of Wisconsin. We're the 14th largest holder of FCC mid-tier spectrum in the country. So we have spectrum for the Dakotas, Michigan, into Iowa, Minnesota, and extensively in rural Wisconsin. That doesn't mean we have spectrum everywhere. We just recently participated in an FCC auction where we bought additional spectrum for Portage County. We bid on Wood County. We didn't get Wood County, but I will tell you that that's a good sign because it means that someone got Wood County. The challenge always is, will they actually convert that into service at some point, or is it an investment? I appreciate Marianne's invitation, and we've been working in Wood County for some time. We work very closely with AT&T, particularly on the FirstNet deployment. AT&T is the sole contractor for FirstNet, so we want to be very careful how we state things. We are not a FirstNet contractor. We are a subcontractor hired by AT&T. And if we get to the gist of it, what that really means is AT&T looked at the deployment of FirstNet nationwide, which is bound to get 99%, 99.5% coverage of the land area of the country. And most measurements have been population, which means if you cover New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, you have a fairly large percentage covered. So this initiative was begun following 9/11. It was legislation, federal legislation passed during the Bush administration, primarily because the responders in 9/11 could not communicate with each other. So the FBI couldn't talk to the fire department, police department couldn't talk to the fire department, state patrol. When you got other states involved in that size of a rescue operation. They couldn't communicate. And they believe it costs a lot of lives, and they believe it costs a lot of lives nationwide when people can't communicate. So it then took the federal government roughly 18 years to figure out what the legislation was that they had passed and to create rules around it. And after those 18 years, then many large companies challenged those rules and filed litigation against the FCC and the First Net Authority and others, saying that the rules were unfair. That all ended at the end of 2017-18, and we proceeded with building the network at a very rapid rate. So we had an ongoing relationship with AT&T. They came to us and said, some of these markets we're just not going to get to for a long time. The rules had a set aside for rural carriers. Tussel is a CMRS provider. We are an eligible telecommunications company under the Telecom Act of 34, which means that we have some level of regulation by the Public Service Commission. We have been providing service since 2001, so we got that back right when we organized our company and went through a lot of regulatory filings. So we filed a Form 499, which indicates where we provide service. Those become the basis for a lot of the mapping tools that you see out there that the FCC uses or the Public Service Commission uses. We have taken a very different approach in that a lot of large companies need a payback in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And our investment group looks at the long term, and we look at a lot of public-private partnerships relative to how we can leverage resources that the state might have, that local communities might have, to aggregate with our resources, be able to handle a longer payback period. And our first experiment into that was Fond du Lac County, a county executive by the name of Alan Beekle, who I have a lot of respect for because he's done some creative things. And he had come to us and indicated that the Fond du Lac school systems were going textbookless, but they had a huge problem and they had terrible broadband throughout rural Fond du Lac. I told Alan that I was really sorry, but Fond du Lac is an urban community and that isn't our niche, and he needed to seek service elsewhere. And he was very persistent, saying, we don't want you to service the city of Fond du Lac. Yeah. We want you to service the town of El Dorado and the town of West Rosendale and these other communities. Yeah. And we will, what do you need for us to incent you to do that? And we said, well, you know, we need money because we're really worried that we're going to build this and then somebody's going to come in over the top of us. And because you're so close to a metropolitan area. And Alan came back and said, you know, there's a lot of money from 2008 flooding called the Midwest Disaster Area Recovery Bonds that are double tax exempt. And we will underwrite those for you if you will agree to use that money. So we, at that point in time, a number of other counties came along. Adams County, Fond du Lac had the best credit rating, so they issued the bonds and did intergovernmental agreements between Adams County, Sauk County. Sauk County lost by 1 vote the bonding vote at 3 a.m. one night. So Sauk County actually dropped out. A lot of internal debating there. I actually left that meeting twice and was called back by the county board chair when I was about 20 miles out of town saying, we reconvened the meeting, we're going to get this right. And at 3 o'clock, they gave up on that one vote. So that was a $5.85 million issuance. What we agreed to do was pay them 50 basis points over their cost of funds. And it became a revenue center for the county, something that they did similarly for economic development with Mercury Marine. We subsequently used that as a model where we had individual townships come to us. The town of Franklin in Manitowoc County said we have 1,400 people. We have no broadband. We project that we'll be under 1,000 people within 10 years as a result of the young people are all leaving because they don't have access to broadband.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, what would it take for us to get you to put a tower right in the middle of our town and serve the whole town? We put together a design program. They took $250,000 out of their general fund and lent it to us over a 12-year period with the same terms as the bonds that Fond du Lac County had. We're now doing the same thing with Kewaunee County, Greene County, Iowa County, and the list goes on. And we now, Scott Felt in Kewaunee County is doing way too good of a job of promoting us. So he's telling all these other counties, and I'm having difficulty keeping up handling the calls that we're getting. We also are doing a similar thing with the Menominee Nation. The Menominee Nation got quite a bit of CARES funds. We also got Public Service Commission grant money. We did not apply for Public Service Commission grant money for the first 8 years of that program. I'll tell you, it's a philosophical thing with me. I believe that things need to be sustainable for the long term, or we're not interested in doing them. And every county that I've worked with, I said we would prefer a loan to a grant. I've backed away from that a little bit as we've ramped up because there are some areas that are just very difficult to serve without some level of subsidization. But that subsidization can be in the form of loans. So, for instance, our Kewaunee County deal, a third of the dollars come from our treasury, a third of the dollars are a loan from Kewaunee County to us that we pay back over 12 years, and another third of it is a grant from the Public Service Commission. We're exploring other grant programs right now, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. We're registered to participate in that auction. We have been talking to the DPI and the Department of Administration about CARES funds that the state may have specifically to help school districts that don't have areas, and they have some funds set aside that we're sort of lobbying for. They're not appropriated for broadband, but we're trying to get them to say what's more important when you have school districts that are putting kids on a bus and driving them to the top of a hill and having the bus driver oversee them because they can't get broadband in their homes. They're forced to do virtual learning. I don't know that I would want my kids sitting on a bus in a cornfield all day in the middle of January. So that is an overview of what we're doing. One of the ways we finance the growth that we have, to give you an idea of the growth that we have, last year we had 26 million in revenue and we had net income of about 2.8 million. I put that out there very publicly because when you start dealing with counties and municipalities, it's a two-pronged sword where people will say, well, you're not making money. Why should we lend you money, or why should we get you grant money? On the other hand, if you are making money, they say, why do you need the money? You're making money. In our case, we come down to the fact that we think we're doing things appropriately, using a mix of our own funds, and we're doing things that are sustainable. And sustainability means it has to be profitable for the long term, not with grant funds, not with anything else. And I think that the municipalities and the counties and the state have appreciated that attitude and therefore have worked very closely with us. With all of that moving forward, I'd like to get specific here for a minute because I'm getting real long-winded, and I know that Mary Ann is a stickler for staying on schedule. So I'm going to share a screen here with a little analysis of the Pittsfield School District and all of Wood County. And can you see the map that I just put up?
Not yet. There we go.
I can.
Now we can.
Okay, I'm going to give it like 4 seconds here for it to populate on everybody's screens. And while I'm doing that, there are 5 colors on here. And the green sites are sites where we have already built towers and intend to put broadband on those towers. All of those towers already have FirstNet service on them. Okay. The pink sites are somewhat undersized because as radio frequency works, the lower the spectrum, the further it goes, the higher the spectrum, the closer in it stays, but the more throughput that you can get, the more capacity you have. And FirstNet is a low frequency project that uses 700 megahertz. So the rings I have on here are 3.5 mile radius. With FirstNet, you can go double that radius out to about 7 miles, 6, 7 miles. The pink sites on here are sites that AT&T has upgraded for FirstNet, and we are now filling in holes in that network. So the orange sites are sites that we either have in progress for FirstNet or that we have in progress to provide broadband because of a relationship we have with a tower company. So you will see that in right outside of Tussel, there's a tower by Vertical Bridge, which is a private equity partner of ours. Arpin is a site we're building specifically for FirstNet. Rudolph is a site we're building specifically for FirstNet. Finley is a site that was just turned down for regulatory purposes, but is desperately needed for FirstNet and for broadband. These 3 sites are within the planning scope that we're going to be doing site acquisition on that are meant to help with the coverage that runs along Highway 54 on sites that are already turned on, and then these would also become broadband sites. So I like to look at this and say what you have today for broadband possibility from what I know, and this isn't analyzing all carriers, this is analyzing AT&T and Bug Tussel only, would be the pink and the green. We have identified the red as areas that we don't believe anybody is servicing well, that we don't have funded or planned for, but that we might want to work with you on a public service commission grant or a county loan or something.
Okay. Okay, we're losing Steve.
Yeah, Steve, we have your video, but we don't have your audio.
Okay. Lance?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I can hear you. I can hear you. We just can't hear Steve, I guess.
Right.
Correct. You can't have a better selling point for what we need to do to upgrade technology.
Well, totally. Lance, I just, because we can't hear Steve, just up, thumbs up or thumbs down on the financing model. Or thumbs in between.
I can hear you. Yeah, we can't hear you, Steve. And I'm wondering if maybe what you could do is go over and send the host rights back to me then, to Scott Larson.
Okay. Chad or Jason, can either of you get to Steve? Okay.
I'm going to,
We
Am
had
I
you there for
back?
a second, Steve.
Steve, we can hear you
Hello?
now.
you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think I gave screen rights back, but
Not yet. It hasn't changed yet, Steve.
so the screen is still on?
No, screen is still on, but I need the host rights. If you want to send the host rights back to me. So if you want to make me the host, Scott Larson the host,
How do I do that?
off to the side of you to the right, there should be a more button that comes up. And click on the more button, and then there's a drop down that should say make host.
Do not have a more button for some reason. I have security, participants, chat, share screen, record, and reaction.
Okay, open the participant
Right.
screen,
Okay,
then hover
Um,
over Scott's name, Scott Larson, and
Yeah.
you should have a button that pops up next to it to the right that says more.
More. And then you can make me the host.
You know, right now, Scott, you've got a little red dot by your name. Maybe
Yeah,
that
that
means,
means it's recording.
oh, okay.
All right,
I
there,
think
now
I
it's done. Now you got it. You got it. We're good.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see where I was at. So right now we are working on the Orange site. We are working with AT&T on the Pink site, and we have just looked at the Red site as a result of the conversations we've been having with Mary Ann. And so, you know, we're sort of an open book at this point, saying, you know, how would you like us to engage with Wood County? Our company has plans to market off of the sites that we already had in queue. Some of those are in the Pittsfield School District, but not in the county. Some of them are in the county. Some of them, we've got some delays from a regulatory standpoint. Rudolph in particular, we need Rudolph for the backhaul to connect to ARPAN. So while ARPAN is done, Rudolph is necessary in order to turn up ARPAN. So you do have some which site comes first, second, third issues as well. So, you know, we are, you know, very interested in working with you in whatever way you would deem appropriate. You know, it is our intent to, you know, serve rural Wood County. It is not our intent to service, and I'm going to say Wood and Portage, and Jackson. We're already servicing the majority of. We've got a couple more sites, and we will have Jackson County handled. We do not intend to serve Marshfield or Wisconsin Rapids or Stevens Point because there are already adequate providers in those markets. We may market AT&T services in those markets, but that is where we want to go. I also want to make a legal representation here that we are not E-rate providers for the school district. anything that you do with E-rate has to go through AT&T, even if it's going through our towers. And we have signed an agreement with AT&T that, indicates that and negates our ability to do that. And we frequently will get school districts say, oh, let's do this as an E-rate program. We, as a company, are not a part of that. AT&T is a part of that. We make our facilities available to AT&T, but any E-rate discussions would need to go through AT&T. Chad and Melanie could help facilitate those discussions with the appropriate AT&T folks. So that's at a high level, and I'd like to open it up for questions or things you'd like me to go into more detail on.
Steve, I've got a question. As you had noted, based on your map, that you've already got a lot of locations identified. It almost seems to me that it's more of a case of how can Wood County, or how can those of us here in Wood County help you get service up in those spots already identified. That seems to me that's more the question, isn't necessarily how you can help us. You already have identified a lot of locations throughout the county. How can we then, through that are here in the county, help you get that service up and running at those sites?
I think it comes down to a couple of items. One of them is zoning and land acquisition. Another is funding. Funding is always a big one. One of the funding mechanisms that we use overall is we build towers in a joint venture that we have with a private equity firm, where we build the tower and then we retain a 50% economic interest in it, but we sell the tower to a joint venture funded by a private equity firm, so at least the cost of the tower can be covered. Now, generally speaking, they require, in order to put that tower in the program, they require one other carrier other than us. So we bring along AT&T or T-Mobile or someone else in order to get that type of funding. We've recently worked with a company called Vertical Bridge that is willing to do what we're calling one-off, which is something that isn't part of the AT&T or the T-Mobile or the Verizon network. And I think a number of these red sites would fall into that category. Now, we still need, for us to turn up a fully equipped site, the tower costs about $250,000 and the electronics cost about $100,000. So, when you start looking at the map that I had laid out, you're talking 16, 18 sites, you're talking, $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably come up with $500,000 to $1 million of that, but there's another $500,000 to $1 million of that we would look to the county or to municipalities and it always gets a little dicey because we have counties that have just point blank said, no, we don't do that. And the townships were in such desperate need that the township said, well, the county may not want to do that, but we'll do that. So you get, the town of Franklin and Manitowoc County that does their own program. Or you get 8 townships in Rock County that do their own program outside of Rock County. We have school districts that have offered to provide funding. We have Native American nations that have provided funding. So, often, there needs to be some type of regional outlay of who's in, who's out, and who wants the service.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's something that I prefer not to participate in. I
Yeah.
think that's something your ad hoc group needs to identify and do some groundwork on and come back to us. So from my perspective, it's zoning, it's, I'm going to say zoning and land access, which is what Jason handles. It is financing, and it is jurisdiction.
One more follow-up question to that, Steve. Is there a minimum number of tower builds that you want to do? Meaning, are you okay doing one-offs, or would you like to do 10 towers at a time? Is there an operational process that you like to follow?
The easy answer is I'd like to do 10. I'd like to do 5,000. I propose we have funding to do 5,000 towers with the private equity firm that we have. It's a matter of finding towers that are sustainable and correct, and then funding the electronics that go along with the towers. We will do 1, or we will do 3, or we will do 5. The issue isn't how many. The issue is whether we have the ability to connect into the network from a one-off.
Okay.
So, we're running into that issue right now on the Menominee Reservation, for instance, where we're building towers where no one has any service. And the tribe is saying, we need this for 911, we need this for emergency management. We have nothing out there. We have no two-way, we have no cellular. We get an ambulance out there, and we just wait till it's out of the abyss. We don't know where they are, we don't know what's going on, and we don't know what's going to come out. Literally, sheriff's deputies will send people in squad cars to take word out to some spot where they can get to the dispatcher to dispatch additional personnel or the correct equipment. So we put together a plan, the towers are approved. There is no electricity there. So, We Energies comes along as We Energies or Excel who's out there. The electric company comes along and says it's $400,000 to get power to that site. So we need a check up front for $400,000. For 3 of the 5 sites we're building in unserved areas, the total cost to bring power in is well over $1 million. So, the Public Service Commission has been very accommodating in that the grants that they've done, they've revised to also allow for bringing power to a site as an acceptable use of grant dollars. And we just got lucky on that one because the CARES Act, the tribe got some CARES funds that they appropriated for broadband and in this case for power. And then there'll be other economic development that comes as a result of having power in those locations. So that's a real long-winded answer to your question, but I'll do 1, I'll do 5, I'll do 10. But there's some analysis that happens before we make the commitment to do it, whether it's 1, 5, or 10, where we understand power and we understand connectivity.
Okay, great. No, thank you, Steve. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Steve, I'm hoping that you can send to me that picture of that map. You can email that to me because I know we're recording it, but I would really like to be able to distribute that to others on this group as well as probably some other people. So I have a real general question. I have to apologize to Dave Holm and Sherry in the Auburndale School District, okay? Knowing I'm from Pittsville, all of the maps show that there is a real lack of service in that southwest part of the county, which is the Pittsville School District. And we're never going to get wire out there, okay? Would I be correct in assuming that the red circles are the ones where you would be looking for that extra funding, say from the Public Service Commission? Okay.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's helpful. That's helpful. And I know that.
My concern with the Public Service Commission funds right now is everyone is talking about locking in. And when I just add up what people have already told me they're going to request, last round there was slightly more than what was available. This round, I think maybe 10% of the requested funds are actually going to be available, and that's with an already largely increase. So I think that, for a project, you're going to have alternatives other than the PSC grants,
Yep.
whether that's other grant programs or whether that is bonding or whether that is, whatever source you want to look at.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the real key drivers for nationally is the concept of digital equity. And I think we have some strong data related to free and reduced lunches and those types of things that might be helpful. Now, when I look at the Auburndale School District, Town of Sherry and the Auburndale School District, I remember seeing some red over there, but I also remember the other colors where you may already have some things in the cooker where you may not need additional funding. That's where we need people like Dave as a town chairman to work his magic to get through some of those other hurdles related to regulatory issues.
Right. I like using Fond du Lac County as a model because I think Alan did a very good job there of bringing all the townships, all the municipalities in the county together and explaining what the goals were and saying, we don't have county-wide zoning, but we want to do this. So bring all of your attorneys and all of your zoning personnel to a big meeting and let's talk about this, see what the issues are. And then they formed a little ad hoc committee of zoning administrators of all the townships. And it went very smoothly. And we're very workable too. There's some folks that we just don't want a tower there. We want it over here. If we can make that work, we're going to do that. I tell our site act people the first stop you should make in every case is to the local town board because they're going to know what works and what isn't going to work and where people are and who's willing to work with you and who's going to come at you with a shotgun and they know all those things.
Steve, Jerry at Pittsville Fire. 2 quick questions. The Findlay site, the northern Juneau County site, you said there were some technical issues with or some legal issue. Is that related to the military ops area that's down there?
Indirectly, we have some. Finley was denied because of FAA issues, which
that would be that.
That would be
that would that.
Yep.
Yeah. So we do run into that, and it wasn't point blank denied. It was denied at that height, and we could bring it down. So when we bring it down, we can't get above the tree line to provide service. So then, you start negotiating with the FAA on, the appropriate spot to go to.
Well, my experience with them is they don't negotiate well. But in the southwest corner, all of that red, that's a big portion of my fire and EMS district. There are a couple of sites down there that, height-wise would be great. The problem is getting electricity to them. And it's a smaller electric cooperative down there, and I don't know how much work has been done with Oakdale Electric, but that's again, that's the supply. That's where the electricity is coming from. You've never used any solar sites, anything like that?
We are exploring solar sites primarily because we were planning on doing that on the Menominee Reservation, but have not needed to now as a result of other funds. But solar is almost as expensive as bringing power there.
Okay.
There are savings over the long term, and right now there are some financing mechanisms and tax credits that are very useful to create economic value to using solar. So we're not ruling out solar. The other thing is, depending on the trees in the area, what we were encountering there was we had some other stipulations on carbon footprints that were important to some folks. And so when you take out half a forest, get enough land area to put the panels in, and the bringing power in at 400, 500,000 because of the additional land we'd have to acquire to plant trees to replace carbon footprint and so on.
Yeah, that's very understandable. The other option down there, if a site would come available, I'm thinking would cover even part of northern Findlay, the location we've got in mind. But that whole corner is a problem for us. Cell signal, all kinds of issues down there. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of population down there, but when we do get incidents, they require a lot of other needs. So this would help enhance us there.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's really helpful is if you reach out to the FirstNet Authority as a first responder, as an EMS provider, you get a higher priority than if I reach out and say, hey, we're trying to put a site in an area that the local fire department or the local sheriff's department needs service in. So, you know, very often I jump up and down about a site, and then the local fire department sends something with 30 signatures on it, and somebody from above calls me and says, you need to move immediately on getting a site right there, you know. So just want to make you aware there was a process that maybe wasn't real well publicized a couple of years back, where counties in particular got to input to where the FirstNet sites went. And, you know, roughly half of the folks I talked to weren't aware of that process, and now really would like to make sure they have a site in these problem areas. So I really encourage the fire department to provide that information on where you're lacking, because it has a lot of power coming from you.
Well, just let me know who to send the letter to, and we'll start it.
Okay.
That's what I like to hear. I'm going to do a quick time check. It is 10:53. I don't want to squelch the conversation, but we do need time for next steps, and we set a hard stop at 11:15. I would like to propose let's keep going with questions for Steve until 11, and then we'd like to keep you on because I think some of the next steps may involve how we work with your company, with Chad, with Melanie, possibly with Jason. Is that agreeable?
That's great.
Hey, Steve, this is Melanie. I got a question. When it comes to towers and stuff, I know in the past we have talked about putting bug tussle equipment on like silos and water towers. Is that something that we can kind of look at to cut costs to get things going faster in the Pittsville area, or is that not able to happen?
With the line of sight and high capacity equipment we're using today to get 25 meg, we're not getting enough height to do that. You know, it worked well 10, 15 years ago, but you know, we still use some silos, but it's really on a limited basis. I would never rule it out, but I would not rely on it for the network.
What about putting LTE out there? Because I know when I'm driving around the area, the homes are surrounded by trees. So I'm just thinking cambium probably wouldn't be the best option in that type of area versus LTE that can go to those homes, and those homes won't have to have that line of sight.
LTE is the plan. LTE is what we're planning.
Awesome.
Yeah, that becomes a spectrum issue, and we do have spectrum adequate for Wood County because we're taking GSM out of service, and that frees up 20 megahertz of usable non-line of sight spectrum. And it increases the cost, but that's the cost that I quoted were based on non-line of sight. And then we use cambium for specific customers that would otherwise bog the network down. So we would run both, Melanie. And to the rest of the crew, what Melanie is talking about is some network components might be line of sight only, where you have to see the tower directly. And if you have a home in a group of trees, you can't see the tower. You either have to get above the tree line or use a different network. And so we would be using both networks in Wood County, both line of sight and non-line of sight. There's advantages to both. Line of sight has more capacity, more throughput. You can get 100 megabytes on wireless. You can get 150 megabytes, 200 megabytes. There's some new equipment coming out where you can get a gigabyte per second on gigabit per second speed on wireless. The non-line of sight is basically cellular, which is why your cellular phones never quite get the speed, because they're at a lower frequency. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the first net frequency.
Hey, Jerry and Mary, if I can ask, I know you guys got those demo phones. How have those been working in the area as far as service goes?
I'm sorry, start with that question again. You mean, Melanie, do you mean the phones you gave me to give to the superintendent of schools?
Yeah, Jerry was supposed to get one of those phones, and then the superintendent, and then you to drive around the area and see how that AT&T reception is.
Oh, well, I made a major mistake then, because I thought all three of them were supposed to go to the school district. So my apologies. I blew that. Jerry did not get one. I did not get one. I gave them all to Fig.
Okay, yeah, we got to get one of those phones to Jerry and then one to you, and then as you guys drive around the community and whatnot, kind of check out and see how the signal is there.
Okay, that goes on the to-do list. I get that from our school superintendent.
As far as here, I've got two of my personnel that are on FirstNet right now. They don't travel down in that area as much as I do. And Marianne, you know where my office is, so you can just drop the phone off here. And we'll give it.
I will do that.
We'll give it a whirl. We did do a study with Aaron Midthen from FirstNet to look at those areas, but the map that was up earlier simply said the same thing that we came up with, where those holes were. So that hasn't changed.
Okay. One last question for Steve before we kind of move into what's our next steps. Hearing none. Well, this has been, for me, and I've been talking to you all along, but I still learn new stuff. So thank you very much for making time to visit with us. So next steps. I had mentioned early in the meeting that Melanie had contacted me about getting together with Jerry Minor and others, like really the Remington Fire Department, because they're part of this also. And unfortunately, I don't know why Bob Diedrich didn't participate today. It's unfortunate we missed him. And maybe also the Pittsville School District. So for us to do a little subgroup of looking at locations, would that be the first thing, looking at locations? And then from there, looking at what? Well, I guess locations is the first thing. After that, Steve, you mentioned funding. And I would foresee that that southwest area.
I like to have funding before I spend a lot of money on sites, because the site selection process, quite a bit of money, you know, because you do Section 106 filing fees with the Department of the Interior and different things that you start paying out quite a bit of fees on the front end. So I would like to have a total plan before we start acquiring land. It's always fun to acquire the land and know where the sites are going to go, as long as there's dollars there to follow up.
Okay, well, I was thinking more like spitballing just potential locations, not, and getting
That's going to be
towns on board.
that's going to be the easy part, particularly if everybody's behind us on zoning.
Okay. So maybe the first step is visiting with the town boards.
I think that would be the town boards and the county board. I don't know how Wood County runs zoning. Is it centralized in the county, or is it township by township?
This is Jason. It's pretty much township by township. I think, as far as zoning goes, probably not going to be much of an issue in the southwest part of the county for the simple fact that many of the townships don't have any zoning. So they really can't claim zoning authority if they don't have zoning. So what that means for this project is you can move forward without having to worry about the local zoning. Even in the townships that do have zoning in the county, many of them don't really have very strict restrictions in regards to cell towers. And also, in most cases now, cell towers are considered essential utilities, and there's very little you can do at town level to block them. So I really don't see local zoning being a block as far as new tower locations going up. I think in the southwest part of the county, one thing we have going for us too is lots of public land. So I don't think siting is much of an issue at all. They'll just probably the biggest thing with siting down there is to keep the towers out of a wet area, out of a wetland or out of a floodplain, things like that. That's probably be the biggest challenge that we're looking at down there.
That was our challenge in Finley. Is the only spots we could find were in that worked for the FAA were in a floodplain, and we can't have that. So,
Right.
Or an environmentally sensitive area. So, and it takes years and an act of Congress to get it out of ESA. So, those sort of become immediate. There's like Finley, the search, we were limited to one or two properties. So when that one property gets turned down, there's nowhere else to go that meets, it's just a lot of lands in ESA.
Jason,
Yes.
the area that I'm looking at in Remington is South Bluff, which is already being developed for other things, which is creating problems for us. The only issue I can think of that may weigh in there is the FAA, because that's part of the flight path for the gunnery range. So that might be a problem. But there's been an old Ranger tower up there for 50 years, and it's still there. So maybe something worked out with that.
That sounds like a good starting point. One thing I was going to throw out there too, and I haven't talked to him yet, but Wood County has a communications person, Eric Engel. And I know Jerry Miner probably knows him well, and a few other people probably know him well, but he's probably somebody we should engage in conversation at some point, because I'm sure he knows a lot of what we're talking about right now, which areas are probably appropriate, which ones aren't. He probably knows existing infrastructure better than most of us on the call that's out there. So it would be good at some point that we reach out to him and engage him in the conversation, I believe.
Good idea.
Yeah, Marianne, if I could, as you talk about next steps and you talk about that, what comes to my mind is, as we're talking about both parties getting together here, I think the key here is Bug Tussel with their map. They've already identified locations or potential locations, and I'm assuming, Steve, that you've kind of got some priorities with those locations. Do we need to kind of match up what Bug Tussel's priorities are with what our priorities are, and then come to a common what matches up then, and go after those highest priorities for both parties that match and start with those issues first?
That's a great suggestion, because not all of the sites are going to be built on the same day, and prioritizing them is extremely important. And I would prioritize not just the red sites, but also prioritize across colors. Because we can pull the red sites and orange sites, pink sites later, but if you take all of the sites and prioritize, say this is the most necessary, and this is number 2 and number 3, and you know, you're going to get to sites in Marshfield and where you don't have service issues that are going to be way down at the bottom. But
Right.
I think it's good to prioritize all of the sites. Sometimes we're surprised by what folks in the local community put as a priority versus what we put as a priority. So I think that's an extremely valuable and important piece of the process.
Okay, good. Thanks. Thanks for that feedback.
So, Scott, how do you propose we operationalize that? I agree that's a good idea.
Well, Bug Tussel's already got their priorities kind of spelled out. So if there's any fine tuning that they need to do, we'll let them do that and present that to us. I think your original thought here of the smaller groups in the region. So if, you and Fig and Jerry get together and address those issues in that corner of the county and start to prioritize those sites and our needs with Bug Tussel's priorities. And I think we're just going to have little pockets throughout the county then to get together and do the same thing and just prioritize our local needs based on what Bug Tussel is proposing and what their priorities are. So that, I guess that's what I see as a bunch of little pockets, whether it's the townships themselves or some other folks in those respective areas getting together and doing a similar exercise of prioritizing.
Dave, your thought from
I think
Sherry
that's
in the Auburndale area?
I would say we could get you a good priority list by the middle of next week. If I had to give you a date, I would say next Wednesday. And Chad, I would ask you to help keep me on track with that because after the call, things tend to fall off my desk. But, I think that we can get that, together. So we'll get you a better copy of the map that has site by number, and then take those site numbers and we'll prioritize those from top to bottom in terms of our desires. And I think what we'll do too, Chad, is we'll engage RF engineering on actually creating a preliminary coverage map. And maybe that's the map we'll provide instead of, my, nickel-sized circle map that is really more for planning than coverage. So, that will also give us effective tower height, which I think will be useful in the next step. So, as an action item, Marianne, I would say that by, let's say Thursday morning, end of business on Wednesday, next week, we would have a map with site numbers and locations and our prioritization of those. That will be for full coverage of Wood County. When I say full coverage, there will always be somebody in a cave somewhere that isn't going to get service, but the majority of folks.
Okay, I've got that. Dave, you've been really quiet. And, I know your thoughts on all of this?
I think it's a good start. I'd like to see what Steve brings us next week. I see a lot of red in the Auburndale School District too, and my township. So my house I see doesn't have any circles over it at all. So it'd be interesting to see a more detailed map to see what we would get covered first before I go any farther. We do need to do something, but I'd like to see more information first, I guess. One question I had is, what's the average tower height?
Average tower height, I would say, is 295 feet.
Okay. We have a couple towers in town that might work.
We have some at 250, and we have a lot at 300. You know, the 300s are typically 295 or 299. There's
Okay.
reasons to go 200 or under 300 from a regulatory and FAA standpoint.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, we just have a few minutes left, and I really want to stick to that that hard stop. I've got down that we'll get the information from Bud Tussel, and I think we all need to take a look at it, and then probably, you know, yes, reconvene in some smaller groups, but also I think it's going to be very important for this group to get together again soon. Would people, you know, next week, I'm going to take out my calendar. Next week I know is Labor Day week, which sometimes causes issues for people. But what would you folks think about trying to reconvene on, well, maybe the Tuesday after Labor Day? Tuesday the 8th? I could always send out a doodle poll, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, I guess.
Make it work.
If you need me on Tuesday the 8th, it's going to be difficult because, well, it depends on the time, but at the same time, 10 a.m., I have a presentation for another county. I've got back-to-back calls with AT&T that take me through till about 3 o'clock. But I don't know that I'm necessary either at that point, because maybe good for you guys to have a meeting without Bug Tussel once you have all of our information and prioritizations, for you to then take what we've given you and, you know, make it fit to your needs.
Mm-hmm. I do believe this group needs some time to process the information from you. I think there'd be value in that. Okay, I'll send out a doodle poll and try to get something set up for that week, you know, the 8th, 9th, 10th, you know, whatever. And also send the map information out. You said you'd have it to me by close of business on Wednesday. So that would be good. Okay. Okay. Other thoughts, ideas? Comments on just where we're at? Or does everyone want to go start the weekend?
No, I think it's good if we try and set the next meeting up so we can review the information we get from Bug Tussel and then see how we want to proceed with that. I mean, we've talked a little bit about setting up some smaller groups throughout the county to address that in Bug Tussel information. So let's look at that information and see if that still sounds like the best approach moving forward.
Marianne, I'm wondering if there is anyone else in the county that should be included on the next call. And I'm thinking maybe the clinics, hospitals. We don't seem to have any of that representation at this point. And I know, you know, their use of broadband is critical, and they have access to financial resources sometimes that we don't.
We can certainly check with them. We can certainly invite them.
Right. We do have a contact
Certainly
from,
invite them.
from the health system that would be the primary contact for these type of stuff.
From Marshfield Clinic?
Yes.
Yeah, so we need to reach out to Aspirus maybe.
Nancy, can you identify who the appropriate person would be at Aspirus?
I will try. I can't off the
Okay.
top of my head.
Angel, I'm wondering if you wouldn't have insight into that as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I could reach out to our community relations contact, Tammy at Aspirus, and see who would be the best contact for that.
Great, thanks.
In addition, well, I think we really need to look at the map, but at some point, we may need to get other school districts involved. I think, Steve, your example of the Fond du Lac School District was excellent in that the city of Fond du Lac didn't need help, but boy, I'll tell you, it's just like in Marshfield School District, the Marshfield city may not need help, but they've got kids out in the town of Rock and the town of Lincoln that are up a creek because of the bad service.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if they don't come in when we break into regional groups, and those may be good group boundaries to set when you have subgroups.
Okay. Ooh, it's 11:17.
I don't know if
Go ahead, Steve.
everyone is on the call, but is there county board representation here? There is. Okay, good. I always.
Lance, do you want to introduce yourself? We have our county board chair, and also I see just recently fell off. Oh no, there's Ken Curry. I thought you fell off. All I see is your ceiling, Ken, not your face.
Well,
District 11.
I know you're talking to Ken, Marianne, but I'm listening intently. Listen to the Fond du Lac story, and if you were speaking of Alan Beekle pulling everything together, I serve with him on a lot of boards. We can certainly bring the county. We can certainly organize a meeting to bring those town chairmen and other players to the table and ascertain partners. So I'm interested as we move forward. I'm absorbing information and I've got 3 pages of notes here already. So I'm paying attention carefully.
Well, Lance, I have a question for you. I just found out yesterday that the Counties Association is holding a webinar in early September on broadband. And I found out about it in a roundabout way. I can't find any information on the WCA website. If you could send stuff to me, I could get it out to others.
Yeah, I'll certainly get you that. Yeah, I'll get you that link. It's interesting because what we're doing at the Counties Association level is somewhat parallel to what we're doing right here. So I get information from both of those, and we will forward those on. And like I said, if we can copy a Fond du Lac County model, Alan Beekle is actually my vice chairman of the Counties Association. So I work with Alan on a weekly basis at the least.
Okay.
Good deal.
Good feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I have to go because I have to do something